Let's start the webinar on time.
I would recommend that also because I have to go at 5:30.
Absolutely, ma'am. Let's start. While each of us fight their own pandemic, the courts are ensuring justice reaches every home and our computer screens are witness to the doorstep availability of justice. WebNyay welcomes all our participants to yet another session on online courts and litigation. And who better than Ms. Ashwarya Bharti, Senior Advocate and Additional Solicitor General of the Honorable Supreme Court of India to enlighten us on this aspect. While I request our audience to keep posting their questions, we welcome you, ma'am. And without further ado, let's start today's session with your experience as an advocate, a trained mediator, arbitrator, and a crusader for justice. Ma'am, we'd like to know what is the impact of arguments addressed in a virtual hearing vis-a-vis in a physical hearing? Over to you, ma'am.
So Palak, it is very difficult. It is very different than real court. For one, I mean, the whole atmosphere of a courtroom, the whole feel of the courtroom, the smell of books, the smell of wood paneled walls, the aura of the courtroom, the chirpiness of and the vibrance of the corridors and your colleagues, all that is completely missing. And it's very cold. I mean, of course, now it's been 8 months, so we've gotten used to these interactions, to look at screen, mostly look at our own faces and smile at our own faces and continue to talk. But or wherever the screen the face is. So the courtrooms are no different. It is the virtual medium, unfortunately, is a medium that brings in a lot of brings in a lot of distance. You feel quite removed and away from the whole situation. It doesn't feel the same. But having said that, I would be completely naive if I was to say that there are no good things about it. There are some things which are very, very useful, very, very good. We have, litigation, justice delivery mechanism shunned technology for a long time. This side of the bench and that side of the bench and the registry, etc. We are all little conservative with technology. That's how we have been. But this sort of, pushed everyone to accept technology, adapt to technology in many ways. Then technology can be a huge force multiplier also. Especially, the problems that our judiciary is dealing with regard to delays, multiple layers and, the whole sluggish system, making the whole system like delays are eating us like a termite from inside. So there are some real good positives which can be taken away from here. So mixed bag, nothing can replace the real courtroom. But we are sitting, the small things like, I mean, we sit on chairs and address courts. We have never done that ever in our lives. And I saw once Mr. Fali Nariman appearing in the court, in the Chief's court. He was appearing, and the Chief Justice, welcomed him. He said, "You're appearing before us for the first time in a virtual medium." So if Mr. Nariman was standing, one could make out that someone was holding the screen, in front of his face, and he just couldn't get himself to sit down and argue. So he was arguing like that, and he said, well, virtual courts I'm not comfortable with. So Chief Justice told Mr. Nariman, well, the courts are not virtual. We are very much here. I mean, it's an actual courtroom. Only the medium has changed to virtual. So mixed bag, but interesting experience.
Right, ma'am. So when fighting the stereotypical and patriarchal mindsets, such as in the landmark case of representing 45 women officers who are now to be given a permanent commission in the army, at par with their male counterparts, can such a matter be heard with same emotions and decided over video conference today?
So Palak, if you had asked me this questions 8 months back, I would have said absolutely not possible. But we have also gotten a little wiser and seen, I mean, it's not the same thing like I mentioned, but then there's a lot that can be achieved here. Uh, it is possible to address arguments with the emotions. It is yeah, I mean, if you feel the strength of your case that you're battling, and the legal points or the factual issues that you are addressing, if you feel in the strength of them, then you go ahead and argue it as vehemently or as articulately as you can. um, Maybe it won't be exactly the same. It can't be. You have your clients sitting there. There is often times that you can't. You have a team of lawyers, but here even your team is not with you. You are all joined from different places, so there's no way of conferring in the courtroom. No way of getting instructions then and there. Um, yes, important matters, it suffers also, uh, because we can't. Initially, the courts were putting away such matters, but we saw in the pandemic that once even the constitution bench sat and heard constitutional matters of importance. And I can tell you from my own experience, some of these continuing mandamus matters, like the MC Mehta air pollution matters, etc., etc., it's a struggle to get inside the courtroom when these matters are being heard, because there are like 100 lawyers representing different, at least 50 lawyers who have to address, then assisting lawyers, their juniors, their clerks, their clients, officers. It's like a complete, pandemonium, if I can say that. So it's very difficult to even walk up to the courtroom. But when you are on a virtual medium, especially these large matters, you are able to address one by one. Of course, it becomes a little chaotic here also at times when everyone's trying to speak over, or others do not mute their mics, because virtual medium, you have to keep that discipline very strongly, that if one person is speaking, others have to mute themselves. Otherwise, it will catch the sound of the fan, the catch of the sound of the dogs barking, all kinds of noises will come. So I wouldn't say it's impossible, but it would be certainly different.
Right, ma'am. And a lot goes in the process of a case, from drafting to filing and now e-filing. The filing of a case can be done 24/7. Documents filed are scrutinized online. Defects are indicated online. Documents filing is done. Fee payment is also done online. The filing of case in the Supreme Court has undergone a radical change with the introduction of the new e-filing module. How effective is this module for a Supreme Court lawyer? And are there any speed breakers in this module?
So, Palak, I am no longer an advocate on record. My current role does not, I don't have a direct interface, but I have been an advocate on record for over 13 years before I got designated. So I am aware of how systems and functioning is. And of course, I speak to my colleagues now. So despite not having a direct, I will tell you, the Supreme Court, I know for, for certainty that for almost 2 decades, Supreme Court has had the system of e-filing. This is not just during pandemic, but the only difference is that for 2 decades, it was on an experimental basis. Now, it is unfortunate that an e-filing thing has to be experimented for 2 decades. So that's why we were conservative. We, as in lawyers, the bench, the bar, the registry, everyone was conservative in using the technology. There were too many maybe false apprehensions and notions in our minds. When it's often said that necessity is the mother of invention. So once we were thrown into this pandemic, there was really either the option was not doing this at all. Now, of course, for the last 2 months, we have gradually opened up and started having some semblance of normal times. But for the first 2-3 months of the pandemic and the lockdown period, it was just not possible. So you could have completely, stopped all work and sat off at home and had no access to justice, or started this. So this is a very, very welcome step. I feel really proud that, our institution responded in such a proactive manner, that our institution was able to step up to the challenge. It was very difficult times, Palak. Nobody, everything was closed. You couldn't go out and, shop for hardware or software, or things were already there. So you had to make do with what you had, and you had to employ solutions which would be effective, efficacious, at the same time secure, because the nature of the work is also such that you can't have like a a Google Meet or a Zoom Meet kind of a meeting where you are holding proceedings of a constitutional courts. And if you see the struggle of the courts across the country and across the world, fortunately or unfortunately, the entire humanity is in this together. We've all been impacted slightly differently, but we are all in this together. So institutions, judicial justice delivery institutions across the world have had to react. There was no option. And there, if you compare that, so I feel that India has done very well. We have responded and allowed these mechanisms to be there and, moved out very quickly. And I strongly feel that these are the areas where the technology should continue to operate. Our registry, especially if you went to the filing sections or some of these, record sections, etc. If you would have gone there, they look like corridors straight out of the, Harry Potter movie, the Deathly Hallows of the Harry Potter movie. They're really dim, scary, not ventilated, etc. Huge records. And technology can be a force multiplier. And we are a country because of the nature of our being a developing country, we having a resource crunch vis-a-vis our population explosion. Our resources just can't keep up with the population that our country continues to have. So this is one area that the gains should truly be taken forward. There should be not just incremental changes, but transformative changes, and these changes must be taken forward to ensure that the registry, the whole mechanism truly becomes more effective and efficacious in justice delivery.
Right, ma'am. And I'm now shifting from litigation to mediation and the trend towards pre-institution mediation, not only to reduce the workload of the court, but the flexibility of addressing the problem with the mediator, along with the comfort that a client feels. As a trained mediator yourself, what are your views on this uncodified subject?
Well, it's not technically completely uncodified. The Arbitration and Conciliation Act, so to speak, in a minor way deals with it. But you are right, essentially uncodified. But the push that mediation has received in the last decade, slowly, but the push that it has received from the judiciary itself, from the topmost echelons, from right from top, from the senior most judges, the Chief Justice and the puisne judges dealing with this and highlighting the aspect of mediation. But I think there is a lot of gap that still needs to be fulfilled. I think India is lacking in exploring and realizing, I wouldn't say exploiting, but exploring and realizing the true potential of mediation and conciliation as a tool for, a redressal mechanism. Also at the same, it's a win-win situation. Mediation and conciliation is one aspect of redressal where neither party goes completely dissatisfied. Both have gained some, both have lost some. You cede a little territory and you gain a little territory. It's that principle on which the mediation and conciliation is set out. It is gaining ground, but a lot more needs to be done, and more so because we are today becoming, exceedingly becoming a country where more and more litigation, more and more, not sometimes frivolous also, but other times seemingly, smaller kind of litigation is also coming into court on issues which may seem to be trivial, and issues which are, essentially between families, between close friends, between close partnerships, where there is already a relationship of trust as a basis, and it has been picked on account of some grounds. So mediation can play a very effective and emphatic role there. Mediation can be also very effective amongst, abject strangers, because when a trained mediator brings out, what is truly your the pros and cons with your right, and how much are the chances of your success. So you bring a reality as a mediator to the mind of your clients, instead of as a lawyer saying that, oh, well, if you have a problem, come, we'll do 10 cases. Even if we succeed in five, that's good enough. So as a mediator, you are bringing the parties more to a realistic ground, bringing more to a closure rather than taking them on diverse paths. And we have a lot of ground to cover on this. In fact, in an ideal situation, we should have mediation pre-litigation, and we should have mediation at regular intervals, even during the pendency of the case and even during the appellate stage. Because I have, experienced that mediation and settlement doesn't just happen, when parties, feel that they need to keep out of it. Sometimes, and oftentimes in India, mediation happens out of litigation fatigue. So you have to bear that in mind, that, even if somebody has not succeeded in mediating in a pre-trial or a mid-trial basis, that is no reason for mediation not to be undertaken at an appellate stage on a regular interval. And how much the system would be gaining. Initially the lawyers felt that this would be taking work away from them. But now that more and more good lawyers and effective and regular lawyers of the court have undergone the mediation training and are acting as effective mediators, the whole scope of mediation and conciliation has broadened up. I would love to see this field grow leaps and bounds.
Right, ma'am. Us lawyers have to be more enthusiastic for mediation. And ma'am, as everything goes from physical to digital, what, as per you, is the bigger barrier in online dispute resolution? Is it the mindset or the infrastructure?
It's always the mindset, Palakji. It's always the mindset. How quickly we changed in the pandemic, each one of us, and I'm not just talking about the justice delivery mechanism and the courts and the lawyers here. Everyone was able to take advantage of the Digital India platform that was already ready. Everybody was able to take advantage. India has amongst the highest numbers of smartphones in the world. Our population was, and the kind of internet reach, broadband reach. I'm not talking about the bigger cities. The reach has now gone on, percolated down to the smaller cities, the second tier, third tier cities, and across wide areas in rural India also. So the technology is there. It's the mindset that is the problem. In fact, institutional technology so far was a problem. We had more technology in our personal lives. We were using more technology as individuals rather than our institutions using the mechanism of technology. There have been lots of pushes that have happened in that aspect also, but I think essentially the barriers are the mindset barriers, and the technology is just an aid.
Right, ma'am. And we would like to know from you how to win a battle without going to the battlefield across screens.
Well, battlefield is where you consider your battlefield to be, and it's not really a place or a geographical location. Gone are those days. Now we are geography agnostic, we are location agnostic. And I'm not just talking about pandemic, even pre-pandemic, so much of our life has moved online. The way we work, the way we entertain, the way we communicate, the way we do commerce, do business. There's so much has moved online, the how we have friends. And well, we are right now only talking about life having moved on virtual mediums. But like I often say, law is something that is so dynamic that it follows life. Wherever life goes, law has to keep pace. And if Elon Musk does succeed in taking us to the space and colonizing the space, you never know, battlegrounds and battlefields will be drawn up there. I think the important thing is the mindset again. Those are the most important tools. In fact, even warfare as we understand has changed. When I was doing these permanent commission matters for the amazing women officers of the Indian Army, Air Force and Navy, We gave examples, and often it was given. This was one of the grounds that was quoted, that you can't have women officers as on the front line. And we gave examples of the changing face of modern warfare. It's not your hand-to-hand combat or infantry that will be the be all and end all of you can't take that away, of course, but it won't be like be all and end all. The modern warfare has moved more in the digital platform. Do you know, in Balakot operation, along with Wing Commander Abhinandan, who of course we all know is the national hero, along with Wing Commander Abhinandan, there was coordinator Minty Agarwal, a woman, amazingly exemplary woman fighter controller, who was sitting in the command headquarters and was responsible for controlling the dogfights that our fighters were doing with the and engaging with the enemy aircrafts. And she was recognized and given a Yuddha Sena medal along with Wing Commander Abhinandan in the Balakot strike. So that shows you that warfare itself in the traditional form has changed. And we, of course, are different kind of warriors. We are in a different kind of battlefield. Our battlefields are the courtrooms, and it's essentially been our skills, our poise, our communication skills, how we are able to deliver under fire, how much of the pain of our client we understand, and how we can convey that in an objective and a professional manner would determine our success on the battlefields. So not much has changed in that sense. Those are my views, Palakji.
And ma'am, we have one of our participants, Mr. Amitav Singh, who wants to know if you could change 3 things to make virtual hearings more efficient and user-friendly, what would they be?
Well, the first thing has to be, if I could get all the glitches out, because sometimes the glitches are so many that, it becomes a hindrance in effective and seamless, interaction and arguments in the courtroom. So taking away, if it could be completely glitch free, that would be wonderful. The second aspect would be, well, there was something that just last week, some of the senior counsels were telling a bench of Justice Lalit that it would be wonderful if we could, if there was better light on the faces of the judges, so we could gauge their expressions. And Justice Lalit smiled. Well, you want to see what we are, what are the expression on our faces when we are arguing. But actually, and of course, the side, conceded that, and we said that it is important for us to understand from the body language and the facial expressions what the judges are feeling, and so that we can address that. So that would be the second thing that I would say. And third would be, I think it will be amazing if, our side could become, more disciplined in the virtual world that is required, that mute ourselves out of respect to our colleagues, so that, whoever is making an argument can make an argument. It's not possible, like courtrooms, to overspeak on each other. It makes the whole thing more chaotic. So I think those are the 3 things that if we could do something about.
Yes, ma'am, that rightly answers the question. And now we have Rishika, who wants to know, how can the government of India be pushed to use ODR for their disputes?
Well, Government of India is the largest litigant in the country. It has been. That is how. That is the legacy that has been for the last 7+ decades. So the online, platforms, the online redressal mechanisms is something that government as the largest litigator must be encouraged and pushed and motivated to use effectively. In a lot of way, the the redressal mechanism which is there prior to the issues coming into litigation, at least those places, the virtual mediums can be used in more effective manner. But I'll tell you again, it's the same set of problems that one deals with. Often the person who is on the receiving end, for example, if it's an inquiry, a court martial, or any other kind of redressal mechanism, people often like to have a preference for personal hearing. They send representations, but they want a personal hearing. That person to person contact is not something that we have been able to give up, but we have, this pandemic has forced us to see things differently, change our vision, change our attitude to a lot of things, and we have been able to see that it is possible to do that, in a much more effective manner, much more than it has laid a lot of ghosts in our heads. So I think that will impact the post-pandemic era when we go back to things as they used to be, back to normal as it used to be. But apart from the pre-litigation stages, the government, just like any other litigant, will be bound by the terms of the court that they are in, by the terms of the tribunal or the commission that they are in. They are treated just like any other ordinary litigant, so they have to. They can make an impact only on the this side of the litigation. Apart from as Government of India, not as a litigant but as a provider, because it's the judicial infrastructure is something that is at the hands of the government. It's the last Chief Justice of India had very correctly said at one of the international platforms that countries that spend adequately in judicial infrastructures, they have more robust democracies, because judicial infrastructure ensures that more and more people have faith in judiciary. Justice delivery mechanism becomes faster, becomes more robust, becomes more effective and efficacious, and it dissuades people from sorting out their disputes on the roadside. Because when ordinary citizens lose faith in the justice delivery mechanism, then they want to sort out their disputes on the roadside. And that can be a threat, not just for judiciary, but that will shake the very root of the rule of law, the very root of our existence as a democracy. So in that aspect, that role that the Government of India has in providing judicial infrastructure, ensuring and enabling technology, the constitutional courts have done well, but the lower courts need to be energized, need to be enthused with the technology to really empower them to deal with issues in a more effective manner.
Thank you, ma'am. And Rishika also would like to know your views on mandatory pre-litigation mediation or online mediation.
Absolutely, it must be made mandatory. I think I've already covered that aspect when we were speaking about the mediation and conciliation. There are many jurisdictions in the world where it is mandatory to go for pre-trial litigation. In fact, it has now been ingrained in some areas, for example, family laws, domestic issues, etc. Negotiable instrument. There are a lot of pre-trial mechanism that has been inbuilt, but I think it should be made mandatory across board, except for where there is a violation of fundamental rights. So the part 3 issues of the Constitution, apart from that, there must be a mandatory but time bound pre-mediation. And I'll go a step further and, like I said, reiterate again that it must be repeated, that efforts to mediate should be repeated in a periodic manner through the entire journey of the litigation.
And now we have Muskan Bansal, who wants to know if justice dispensation system changes appointing young lawyers in the apex court as judges via direct appointment. What's your take on it? Ma'am, please throw some light. We have a young lawyer asking you a question.
That's a very interesting thought you have, my dear colleague. But I must tell you that direct appointments to the Supreme Court have more been aberrations than been the norm. In the last 70 years, we have seen just about 5-6 lawyers who got designated directly from the bar to the bench. Of course, in the recent years, currently we have Justice Rohinton Nariman, Justice Lalit, Justice Nageshwar Rao, and Justice Indu Malhotra. So currently, I think this is a golden time that we have the highest number of people ever. Like I said, I mean, ever there have been not more than 6 or 7. I forget the exact number, but it's not more than 6 or 7 in 7+ decades. And out of that, 4 are currently there. So you can see, how emphatic the current moment is. But we haven't seen younger judges being appointed in younger in age being appointed to the Supreme Court, either through the High Courts or through the direct appointment mechanism. I think the experiential learning, initially I also used to feel that, well, you learn very quickly. I mean, you are already a law, you are already a Vakil Sahab when you pass out. That's how, the society addresses you. So why not? You're good enough. And the constitutional requirement is also just 10 years of practice. But you see the MOP that has been drawn, by the collegium. The MOP requires mandates almost that not less than 45 years of age for elevation to High Court, and for Supreme Court also nobody less than 55 is considered for elevation. That is also on the younger side. And somewhere one realizes the importance of experiential learning is a lot in law. Education, theory, textbook learning, classroom learning is important, but experiential learning is what really rounds off your maturity to another level. And I think that maturity is required when one is called upon the honor of and the privilege of being a judge on the highest court of the land. So young lawyers, be career judges. Start with the grassroots, judiciary, so that is where the first point of contact is, and work your way through up.
Right. Thank you, ma'am. I hope Muskan has a Muskan on her face after hearing your answer. And we have Amitabh Singh again asking, how can we take online dispute resolution and virtual hearings to the rural India?
Well, I can tell you, Palak, that every district headquarter has. If I can request our colleagues to please mute. See, rural India does face a lot of challenges in terms of technology and virtual hearings, etc. But having said that, the reach of judiciary, the reach of courts, through district level courts, then below the district level courts, the municipal level courts and Gram Nyayalayas across the length and breadth of the country, added by the statutory mechanism in terms of the Legal Services Committee Act of 1987, where it is now legal aid committees, legal aid clinics are now a statutory mechanism in all district courts across the length and breadth of the country, together with the aspect of mediation centers being enabled by video conferencing mechanisms. It is not from homes that you can have access from a rural part of the country. In any case, access from home is only for a home, or home offices is only for lawyers when they are addressing. Otherwise, for others, if you have to come and attend court hearings, there are mechanisms that are prescribed. So I think essentially the difference will be how much technological infrastructure is created at the district levels, and now district headquarters are very well located. Apart from some remote areas, mountainous, etc., those areas which are far flung in reach. Otherwise, the access to the district headquarters in most part of the country is not that remote. I'm not sure how Gram Nyayalayas can be empowered with. I'm really not sure how they're working and how much of technology they are able to use. But sure, once we have started, if it started from the top of the pyramid, it will certainly trickle down. That is one way of going about it.
Right, ma'am. And ma'am, any session with you is incomplete without enlightening the audience on the Constitution of India. So ma'am, please share with us your passion for the Constitution law, and everyone here wants to hear from your mouth about the Constitution of India.
Palak, one can't answer about the Constitution of India in one answer. But let me tell you, my love for the Constitution of India, my extreme passion for the Constitution of India is on account of the fact. So I'll urge all of you to have a look, go to the Parliament Library, have a look at that helium gas filled case in which the original calligraphed, original signed, beautifully decorated Constitution of India and it has these pictures which are drawn by and painted by Nandlal Bose and his disciples in Shanti Niketan. Please have a look at that constitution. Please look at, and there are copies of that original constitution. It's don't look at this, this cold constitution book too often. Have one copy of that original constitution as a student of law. Keep that in your collection. Look at it in the virtual. You can find it on Google and look at the pages. It is an incredible document in the sense that it actually amalgamates the best practices of the world. At the same time, while recognizing that we were becoming a young democratic republic country 70 years back, we were also a nation with thousands of years of heritage, civilization, culture, which was very, very precious to us. So the Constitution has actually kept that, that background in mind and created a new building on the edifice, on the foundation of that thousands of years of culture. That is a big takeaway when I see that how we have taken, from Japan, from Germany, from South Africa, so not just US, UK and USSR, of course, where UK and US were the majority influences, but even smaller countries we have taken from, and we have taken very interesting aspects of that. And you see it from the perspective of the world in 1947 to 1949, when the Constitution was being drafted, when world over, the modern world that was shaping up had so much of disparity, had so much of upheaval. The world was war torn in so many places. There wasn't recognition for women's rights in so many places. They did not have universal adult franchise. Switzerland has given women right to vote only in 1971. So that is the kind of disparate world that we were going through. It's easy to judge today in 2020 what are the rights, but look at it from the perspective of when it was framed in 1947 to 1949. And you see the different, different parts. Part 3, of course, is the heart and soul of the Constitution. It's the most important fundamental rights. But even Part 4 of the Constitution, it is so significant that, what was not possible, what was our aspiration as a nation, but what was not possible as a young nation, our founding fathers thought it fit to include as directive principles of state policy in Part 4, so that the nation could, frame its policy in that direction. And when you see the landmark judgments of the last 7 decades, then you see the working of the Constitution, how beautifully Constitution has been interpreted by our Constitutional Court, and how dynamic interpretation has been given to it, how the courts have gone on to say that Part 3 is like empty vessels. Every generation has to fill those vessels with the wisdom of its own time. And, from the same constitutional provisions and principles, we have seen the working of the Constitution has blossomed really the Constitution of, and has been a lighthouse, for the robustness of our democracy, for ensuring the vibrance of the rule of law. And you do a little comparison with countries around us, our twin country, our twin nation, who celebrates independence just one day before us. That country, despite a common cultural heritage, lineage, value system, same colonizer, same independence, everything, in the last 7 decades plus, the data of that country is that not even a single head of the state who was elected into office has been removed by an election. Every elected head of the state of that country was either removed by a coup, killed in office, removed by an army appointed SIT, or some nefarious mechanism found. And in our country, it doesn't even occur to us that elections happen, and it is so easy, and it is so frictionless, the change in power. The outgoing person, the incoming person gives a bouquet of flowers to the outgoing person gives a bouquet of flowers to the incoming person. Today's headline in the paper, Zuckerberg, the founder of Facebook, is saying that the US is at a cusp and a real risk of a civil war because of the election that they're facing. The mega store Walmart has removed firearms from its showcases and the sales floors because of the number of gun sales that have happened, unprecedented gun sales that have happened in the US, and the elections that are just around the corner. And US is supposed to be a democracy with a constitution for about 250 years. They pride themselves as amongst the most developed democracy. So when you see this is the functioning of democracies across the world, of course, we are not even talking about countries like China, where if you Google Winnie the Pooh, the notification that comes is, of course, there's no Google there. They have their own search engine. But if you search the Disney character, Winnie the Pooh is this adorable bear from the Disney character. You search that, and what comes is the content cannot be displayed due to local regulations. And you realize why. I mean, you scratch the surface and want to find out why. What did Winnie the Pooh do to China? And then you realize that, well, what has happened is that some media people have compared the character Winnie the Pooh with the premier of China, and that too not today, that this was like 5-6 years back. And Winnie the Pooh you can't even see it in China. So when you see, often we, for realizing what we have, the blessings that we have to look at people around us. So when we talk about the context of our nation, we have to look at other nations. That gives us a better understanding of the perspective. And I feel that our journey has been so spectacular, despite India being a miracle really to succeed as a democracy. Nowhere before and never after did 1/6 of humanity come together to form a single free democratic nation. And a country with so much of diversity, all religions of the world, all languages, different ways of life, different food, different cultures, different value system. The kind of disparity that we have is not just unheard of for a country, it is unparalleled even in a single continent anywhere in the world. And for that example to succeed for the last 7 decades and succeed, of course, we have our own set of challenges. I'm not saying everything is all hunky-dory. That's not how life is. But we have been a success story. And that success story is to large measures to the constitutional framework that we have and the manner in which that constitutional framework has operated in the last 7 decades. So that is why when I see it from that perspective, you can't afford not to fall in love with Constitution of India.
Absolutely, ma'am. And that was a constitution lawyer talking. Thank you so much. With your unmatched art of litigation, I'm sure our audience has graduated in this session itself. And now I would like to invite Mr. Puneet Jindal, who is a designated senior advocate with over 35 years of experience in the Supreme Court of India, Honorable High Court of Delhi, Shimla, Bombay, and Chandigarh as well. He has keen interest in arbitration, mediation, and online dispute resolution, and is a mentor for WebNyai. So it is a pleasure to have him here with us to deliver the vote of thanks today.
Good evening, everyone, and especially good evening, Aishwarya ji. And it's a treat to hear you, and especially seeing your passion towards the Constitution and your, I would say, multifaceted personality, including outstanding performance in NCC, sports, and other activities. I mean, it's really wonderful that we have you on this platform. As you know, as you were rightly saying, that now it is the time for we people to start something by which we do have a mechanism where people don't have to reach to the court, don't have to go to the court. For for a large number of things, we need to settle those disputes, those small issues outside the court. And for that, Web Nyay, as the very name suggests, web means this internet space, and Nyay, as all know, in the Hindi and Sanskrit word, whereby we settle all the dispute by a settled proposition of law, by rules, by a rule of law. And fundamentally, Web Nyay basically mediates and try to mediate between the parties, conciliate and mediate. And if the mediation and conciliation doesn't succeed, then ultimately it through arbitration. So it is basically alternate dispute resolution online without a person reaching a court. So we do have two kind of software available, whereby we do provide that with regard to all e-commerce. If any person has got any issues with regard to the same, they can approach the ODR instead of approaching the court, and a dispute is most likely to be settled. So it is, of course, it's in the inception stage so far, but with the blessings of many people and people like you, certainly it will succeed. And you being an additional Solicitor General, we all would request you that, as you very rightly pointed out, that in most of the cases, the Government of India or the other state governments, they are the party, they are the litigants. And so far, the biggest problem which I can, with my little experience of over 33 years, I can say, is that whenever there is a dispute with any government or a government institution, even the good ranking officer, if they reach the court in a Lok Adalat or a mediation center, they do not have the mandate to settle any dispute. They always have a problem that we do not have any authority. So what, as a citizen of India, I would like the Government of India to legislate, just like the Right to Information Act, we have designated officers to give information, like we call them PIO, Public Information Officer. In every department, in every government organization, we must have a hierarchy of officers who are able to take a decision with regard to any litigation, either pre-litigation stage or during the pendency of the litigation, to take a call, so that that dispute, they have got the authority, they have got the mandate by virtue of law to settle such dispute through alternate dispute resolution. As you rightly pointed out, that in 70 to 80% of the litigation, government or government body is a party. So that such kind of amendment or such kind of provision will go a long way in promoting the alternate dispute resolution. And if alternate dispute resolution physically is possible, it's more possible online also, for which we are making all efforts to. And I conclude by thanking you for sparing your time, valuable time, and to the other participants for such a lively discussion on the day. Thank you very much.
Thank you so very much, sir. Such kind and gracious and affectionate welcome. Thank you. It was a privilege for me. And what a young, dynamic, energetic team under your mentorship.
Thank you.
So, congratulations, Palakji. It was a wonderful evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and thank you, everyone. We hope to see everyone once again next week on another session, and hope that Web Nyay makes dispute resolution, virtual dispute resolution available to each nook and corner. That is our motto. And with that, I thank everyone today, especially you, ma'am. Thank you for sparing time. And as promised, we are leaving you on time. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.